Welcome to another episode of Ride the Stream. I'm Michelle, and I'm joined with Travis, my ever wonderful friend, discussing all things Lost. And in this week, we are talking about episode 20 of season one, entitled Do Not Harm. Welcome, Travis. How are you today?
I'm good. We've weather-wise, it's very windy. We've had some power outages. So if there are any blips in this episode, please bear with me. This episode was really hard to watch. It's very emotionally just all over the place. Some ups, some big lows. Um, yeah, it's a probably the heaviest episode of the season so far.
Yeah, so for our watchers, or if you're listening, if you're a newbie like me and you haven't watched the episode, definitely take a pause because we'll be talking about spoilers. And this is probably one of those episodes where we really, really encourage you to go check out the episode on Netflix or wherever you are going to be watching it. Definitely watch that first and then come back and then listen to our conversation. Because hate to spoil things for you, so lots of spoilers ahead.
Yeah, big time.
And impactful spoilers too, I would say. That's why we're strongly encouraging to go check the episode out first before listening to us chat about it. So originally, this aired on April 6th of 2005. We actually had a new writer for this episode, her name Janet Tomorrow, and directed by Stephen Williams. And I only bring this up because I noticed that she was a new writer to their group of writers that have been writing the episodes through this season. And the director, Stephen Williams, he also had directed another Jack-focused episode. It was episode 11, All the Best Cowboys Have Daddy Issues. So I thought that was, and because this one is also focused on Jack for the flashbacks, I thought that was kind of an interesting tie-in, and definitely wanted to mention that before we get going. Um, I would say, Travis, do you think ready for a plot synopsis, and then we kind of like get in there and start talking about this thing?
Yeah, I'm gonna take some deep breaths, try to get through this thing.
Yeah,
We were talking about it offline. It's just heavy. So
yeah, yeah. Big stuff coming. So, okay, so on to the plot synopsis, and there's that's Sam, by the way. Hopefully, we won't have too much tabby trouble back there while I'm doing my synopsis.
oh,
Are you okay? Oh my goodness. Yeah, he says I'm leaving. And then of
maybe we make a clip of this and I post it on Instagram or
course, I know, really. Well, we promised drama, man, and we
something. Yeah,
delivered.
absolutely.
Oh my gosh. And of course, Algernon's like, where'd my friend go? Baby. Yeah. Okay, so without further ado, go ahead and get started. Birth and death, the bookends of the life cycle. In this 20th episode, Do Not Harm, Jack quickly dons the doctor suit as he focuses on Boone and assesses the extent of injuries and what injuries should be addressed first. The audience is transported to a trauma center a la The Island, meaning resources are scarce, and it is a call for all hands on deck. Jack barks orders to surrogate nurses Kate, Sun, and Hurley. Each are initially paralyzed by the shock of Boone's injuries, but Jack's commanding tone wakes them up to action. Without a full understanding of how Boone sustained his injuries, remember, Locke lied about what happened and then disappeared. Until Jack was administering a blood transfusion in the fourth quarter of treatment. It was realized by Sun and then Jack that there was no saving Boone. Once Boone vocalized that he was letting Jack off the hook to save him, did Jack physically collapse into Boone's cot from the sheer exhaustion and the adrenaline rush that had been carrying him through for hours. Sadly, Boone was our first core survivor to leave the island. In high drama fashion, Claire started having contractions the same day evening that Jack is in his own trauma hell. Kate, Charlie, and Jen are weaved into Claire's story as she gives birth to a healthy baby boy by campfire light. After the loss of Boone, some happiness was very much needed in this episode. You might be asking, where was Shannon? Well, Saeed and Shannon spent the day and night together in a romantic escape. Not much is revealed of their time together, other than the fact that Shannon does want to take it slow, and Saeed responds that he didn't have any expectations, to which she gave him a look like, sure. And he says, well, I had hopes. And but otherwise it was no kissing and telling in that front. But understandably, when Jack does break the news the next day, Shannon is visibly shaken, and later we are voyeurs as she grieves her brother. Flashbacks focus on Jack as he is preparing to get married to Sarah, a woman who had been a patient of Jack's. His commitment to her and her recovery helped her to walk again. While Jack has cold feet and self-doubts, his father explains that Jack's commitment is what makes him tick, but that his weakness is knowing when to let go. Jack, who had fears of failing as a husband and father, remember, he has a tumultuous relationship with his father. He is understandably nervous and second-guessing his decisions. In the end, he does marry Sarah. So that's kind of a quick synopsis. I didn't want to do too much of a deep dive, but
Oh,
I think
that
we
was
hit
great.
all the narrative beats on that one. And right off, I mean, you're a veteran, Travis. Did it hit you in the smalls just as it did the first time you watched it?
It's devastating. It's one of those things where even when I mean, there's this level of surprise that he's like, man, I can't believe that Boone is gone and that was part of the, path that he was being led to. Like I wonder, we've talked about we'd love to get the like lost backstory or the all the notes that they have on the story just to know all the ins and outs. Like, I wonder, like, at what point was this episode planned?
Mhm.
Um, it's one of those things where we talked offline. The cast is incredible. Um, Everything feels real. There isn't any sense of like, I'm not sure about this sequence. No, there's no time to truly process everything because it's like right in your face. You've talked about it. You feel like you're right standing next to the castaways. And I think you're 100% right about that. You feel like you're right next to them. Um, the intensity from Jack, um, when he's trying to snap everyone out of it, when he's giving them orders and like, hey, you got to
Mhm.
go to the beach or Boone's gonna die. And the injuries are gruesome. Um,
It was definitely very visceral with regards to the injuries that Boone sustains. I mean, if you're at all queasy about blood, like we know Hurley is
yeah,
from a prior episode, but yeah, this is not an easy episode, and like you said, it probably the hardest so far, or one of the very hardest ones that we had to watch,
yeah,
now discuss.
yeah. It's I it definitely, you know, there. there were tears. It's not an easy thing. I'm not big on admitting stuff like that. It's a I will call a character flaw of my own. But this episode just hits that way. There's no there's no way of getting through this episode and not feeling impossibly sad about it. Um, and even to the end when everyone's surrounding Claire at the end and she's holding that baby and Hurley notices Shannon Saeed walking up and he taps Jack on the shoulder and he just the expression on his face, there's exhaustion there, but there's this remorse and it's just gutting. Um,
I think that's a good
Shannon's
word.
response,
Yeah.
like, so the cast, I mean, they make you feel this episode. So,
Yeah.
um, were you uh and you're as the resident newbie watching it for the first time? I think we briefly talked about it, but how would you say your experience was as you were watching all of this unfold for the first time?
I would say that I was absolutely devastated, gobsmacked at the fact that we were losing, one of the kind of core survivors that we've been, learning about over the several weeks, episodes. I mean, he had his own flashback episode, so we had some insight into him. Um, I think that I was definitely in tears, even the third time watching the episode this morning. And even, giving the plot synopsis, feeling a little, heavy heart, and feeling a little choked up of having to say that, Boone is not on the cast anymore.
Yeah,
Um, it was the loss is, you know, leaves you kind of gutted. And now you're not going to have Boone. And part of the thing that kind of nagged at me after watching the episode was we have conversations around how Locke firmly believes that the island's kind of this all-knowing guiding hand. And I think of like, what did Boone do that precipitated him having to die? And I'm
yeah,
left feeling that and thinking of, those kind of thoughts after watching the episode. And of course, those are not thoughts that um our survivors are having. Like, Jack's not thinking that because, he doesn't think about the island in that regard. This is
yeah,
a Locke thing. And as I was rewatching, noticing the fact that the presence of Locke, even though he wasn't present, kind of his beliefs were present. And I thought that showed a lot of power of who Locke's character is in the show, um, and how that kind of precipitates, even though he may not be on the screen. The fact is that he still had a presence. Um, and he wasn't in this episode. He is long gone. He is a ghost.
yeah,
Um, and even though, yeah, I think it was like last November when I would have watched, the next episode, I actually don't remember now, how he came back and how do you come back from that? How do you um kind of mediate lying? Because not only did you lie about Boone's how he got his injuries, which would have been
yeah,
helpful if they knew, probably. Um, would that mean that Jack wouldn't have tried as hard? I don't think so. I still think he would have been totally committed to trying to save Boone, regardless. But then also the fact of like the hatch, because Boone, in kind of his delirious state, does mention the hatch and that he wasn't supposed to say anything.
yeah,
And we even have in the closing, um, which I thought was very interesting because I rewatched it a couple times to make sure that I was kind of seeing it correctly, was that when Kate comes up to Jack and, you know, talks to him and trying to get Jack to talk about his feelings about losing Boone, um, he's like, well, what is there to say? And he's like, well, he died. And, Jack is like, he didn't die, he was murdered. And he gets up to walk away. And Kate says, where are you going? To find Locke. And he
Yeah.
doesn't say that Locke is the murderer, but, it is kind of interesting what's stated and what isn't stated. And of course,
Yeah.
that's always, I think, the core with this show is what we see, what we don't see, what's occurring on screen, what's occurring off screen. We get that quite a bit. And of course, wrapping that up into, you know, answers or questions that are asked that are answered, and then more questions are added, that leave us wondering, for the next episode. But yeah, I
Yeah.
was devastated. I like Ian Somerhalder as an actor anyway. And I know that he was on Vampire Diaries, so I know you and I talked in the green room where I was like trying to figure out, like, well, did he have a contractual thing going on that precipitated him leaving the show in the first season? Because I was kind of surprised that he was the first death, core survivor death. And Vampire Diaries didn't come out until like four years later. And he was doing a few things, but it wasn't like there was this big show that took him from Lost to something else. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So you know, I think maybe Lost was the George R. R. Martin before,
Yeah.
his whole series, and how he was very ready to kill off a main character without hesitation. And I feel like, well, Lost has done that, you know.
I was I remember watching it for the first time and like I was shocked that Boone died and that someone from the core group was killed off.
Yeah.
Um, and that had me spinning my wheels because I was like, does that mean anyone's fair game, or is it because
Hmm.
Boone wasn't one of, I guess, the main characters that he was expendable to the show? Um, so but I had that feeling of like, well, then I was like, well, who isn't top tier? Like, who isn't like necessarily essential to the narrative?
Hmm.
But I was definitely, I mean, gobsmack's a great word. I totally think that describes it perfectly. Um, and I just, you're just, I was just caught off guard because my assumption was like, he's got some injuries. And I guess I just thought, oh, Jack will fix it because
Hmm.
he's done it before. And my brain didn't even register until right now. Oh, well, he didn't fix the Marshall. And
No,
during that whole episode, I wasn't even thinking about that.
I wasn't either.
And,
And he was not able to save the woman that drowned in the ocean. So he
yeah.
wasn't successful there either. I mean, that man has been a failure.
Oh, I don't know why. I assumed that he would find a way,
Yeah.
um, to save him. I think the realization for me was when Sun recognized it,
Hmm.
when he was wanting to cut off the leg, and Sun was like, he's bleeding internally. And that kind of like registered to me like, oh crap. Like,
Yeah.
is this it? Um,
Yeah, because he had a collapsed lung. He, they reset his leg only to later find out that it's actually crushed. And then internal bleeding going on, plus all the injuries on his chest as well, in
yeah.
addition to the collapsed lung. That guy was hurting. He's hurting
Yeah.
bad.
Oh, yeah. That was he. If anyone needs to know what those injuries sound like, Boone's uh the actor's role in that, like the screams, like when they reset his leg and Hurley's outside of the tent listening to the screams, and like it sounds awful. It sounds horrendously painful. Um,
And not
and
anywhere. And we can go back to the episode where Jack had dislocated his shoulder and he, screams out, but you know, amp that up times 100 at least.
yeah,
And you might get close to what Boone was going through.
yeah, and going back to Locke being part of this episode, even though he's not seen,
Hmm.
like, Kate fills in Sawyer on what's happened, and that Locke said he fell off a cliff looking for boar, and Sawyer's automatically suspicious. You mean the boar that they never find? So
Yep.
there's, and then him leaving Boone to Jack and ditching and not telling him what happened. So there's all these multiple people who are now questioning Locke, and maybe it's because he is this mysterious person with all these skills that everyone kind of questions. Oh, you're not a box supervisor.
Yeah.
Um, so there's always this sense of people not necessarily believing whatever he's saying, even though he's such a useful part of the community, um, which gives the feeling that um, Jack's going after Locke, but it almost feels like he's not going to be the only one because if it just seems like we're getting to the sense of like, oh, are we going to have a potential another Lord of the Flies moment?
Hmm.
Much when Boone's character was about to be crucified because he took the water in one of the earlier episodes, and everyone was.
Yeah.
So I don't remember the. That's the great thing about passage of time. I don't remember a lot of what happens in each episode. Um, so I don't even know if Locke reappears immediately in the next episode, um, or if it's just a Jack searching for him or whatever. But in this episode, I will say that um, even though he's not there, the question of what they've been doing all this time being revealed by Boone, um, it doesn't help his case. The fact that they've been hiding what they've been doing for weeks,
Hmm.
um, and it just makes him seem like a bad guy, um, which stinks because
Yeah.
I've been a fan of Locke, not his methods, but um, so I can only imagine what the result will be once he's found. Because I love that I don't remember. Um, were you, was there a point in time that you were thinking, oh, we are going to lose Boone, or was it what until the end that it happened that you were like, oh crap?
I realized when Son gave him water and he was coughing up blood, I was like, oh, he's not going to make it because that's internal injuries and there's no way to know. I mean, they don't have an X-ray machine on that island. So there's no way to ascertain just the extent of the injuries. The fact that, blood was even, filling his leg, meaning that, he had a lot of damage inside. So that was the moment that I knew that he was not going to make it. I realized along with some, I've watched a lot of, medical shows, that, you see blood and you're kind of like, well, we're not in the, tuberculosis decade, so that's not good. But
Yeah.
yeah, her look to Jack when they kind of exchange um, gazing at each other. I mean, there's definitely a mental thing going on because she had told Jack, what are you doing?
Can't
Cutting
save
his
him.
leg off, amputating his leg is not going to take care of it. you know, that's just not going to do it. And when he's getting ready to slam down that compartment door on Boone's leg, he looks at her, and she looks right back at him like I really felt like I was reading on her face, like, what the hell do you think you're doing? You're going too far. And they just look back at each other, and then she finally turns away, like, well, if you're going to do this, I'm not watching you do this
Yeah.
and make the gravest error, you know, because it's not going to help him.
Yeah,
She's like
and
the
he even
same
repeats.
person. Yeah, she's like the rational voice as Jack becomes so I hate to use the word, but I'm gonna say so committed to saving Boone that
Yeah.
he loses good judgment skills to realize that he needs to stop. And that's the adrenaline, that's the you know Hippocratic oath to save at any, however possible, to administer life-saving, methods to keep the person alive. I get it, but she, being who she is, understood that he needed to stop.
Yeah. And they had the Jack repeats a phrase from I think it's episode 4 that Locke had uttered. Don't tell me what I can't do.
Hmm.
So I thought that was a
Hmm.
nice callback, and that they have
Yeah.
kind of a similar mentality where they get a little bullish in there. I've got my eyes set on something. I'm going straight ahead, and no one can tell me otherwise. But Sun was definitely the cool head in the room. She understood when Jack needed to rest, to go get some air. She understood when he was giving too much blood and pulled it from his arm. She found the possibly a sea urchin's needle, whatever sea creature you call it, sea creature the she found. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know if it was an urchin or
Yeah.
not,
We don't know,
but
folks. Don't shame us.
yeah. If you do know, you can leave
Yeah, leave a
leave in
comment.
the comments.
Yeah.
She found the thick stick to put in Boone's mouth to clamp down on with the pain, and I
Which
mean,
I
she just
I I
seemed
liked about that, because if sorry to interrupt, but
no,
since you brought it up, I liked how Jack is just focused on, hey, your your medicinal herbal remedies are not going to work here. And then she puts it in his mouth like it's not an herbal remedy, because
yeah,
she says this is going to help with the pain. And he's like, oh, no, no, your stuff's not going to work here. And then she puts the stick in his mouth like, no, it's to keep, you know. And I think there was like, okay, well, can you hold his shoulder down? And she's like, yes. So then I think that she's able to problem solve when he's not able to kind of see the forest from the trees, or however
yeah,
that statement goes. But
yeah. She did a great job at.
mm,
I think the whole situation is overwhelming, and Jack being he's trying to multitask many different injuries, and Sun is there trying to take care of Jack and Boone. Like,
mhm,
um, so her being able to say, "Hey, we want him to bite down on this, not necessarily his tongue," or
yeah.
um, and the fact that she can register those small things kind of talks about how in tune she is with healthcare to
Hmm.
whatever degree, and how, whether it's tunnel vision on Jack's end or sheer exhaustion or stress, to where maybe he thinks he's the only one with the experience to do what's needed, that he can't, but he can't think of everything. If
Yeah.
you have a team in a trauma ward, you're going to have multiple people there. It's probably going to be, a little more organized,
Hmm.
um, more people that you can depend on. And I think Jack, since being on the island, has been looked at as the sole leader. He's the one to, like, okay, I have to fix all these problems.
Hmm.
And I think this was a culmination of, like, I don't think he just could. I don't want to say he couldn't handle the situation, but his focus was narrowed. Um,
And
and
it's
I do think, I
personal.
mean, yeah, and I do think he made the right choice. Like, hey, I have to try to keep Boone alive. People make deliver babies all the time. As I say that so lightly, but saying, like, hey,
Yeah.
Kate, Charlie, Jen, go take care of that. And they have much better odds of survival than Boone without a doctor.
Yeah.
Um, and Claire's whole situation, geez, that's a whole other uh, scenario in of itself. Claire, everything in her role seemed believable. She was afraid. She was feeling contractions, but didn't want to admit it, and she didn't want anyone around her. Um, and I made a note this morning, if because Kate was bringing alcohol back to Jack from
Hmm.
Sawyer, and she tripped and fell and broke some bottles. If she doesn't trip and fall right there, she doesn't find Claire.
Hmm.
And my thought is, well, then what would have happened to Claire and the baby? Which Dave just, like, passed himself if she didn't just happen to, like, fall right there. So just a little bit of an odd circumstance of, like, oh wow, that
Yeah.
if she didn't fall right there, who knows what would have happened.
Yeah. And thank goodness, Jun was able to hear Kate's cry for help because she was trying to get somebody to come so that way, because Kate inherently knew that she needed to stay with Claire, even though Claire was pushing her away.
Yeah.
Kate knew that she needed to stay with Claire. So Jun, who, can't speak English, but he heard her voice and, he was the only one available, because he was on the beach in his little area by himself. He was actually looking to see if Michael and Sawyer were still at the little campfire that they had earlier in the episode. And, he didn't hesitate and took off running, and understood enough. I really liked the scene when John goes in to the cave and is kind of like seeing all this stuff going on. I don't know what was going through his mind, but Claire getting ready to have her baby, and then he arrives there because he doesn't know anything about Boone, and he's got to be a bit shocked.
Yeah.
And he's looking at Boone, he's looking at Jack. Oh shit, my wife is there that I'm supposed to really hate because she can speak English. But
Sees a
as
tube of
soon,
blood going from Jack to Boone, like,
yeah. And you know, Jack starts asking, rapid fire questions, and Sun is trying to ask Jun in Korean. And it was so interesting when he looks at her and Jun looks down and takes kind of a more almost respectful, kind of a bit more controlled, but answers her questions, like whatever their problems are, out the door. The
yep.
focus is Boone, it's on Claire, and what does he need to do? And I really liked how that visual dynamic kind of played out between all of them. And the fact that Charlie happened to be there as well, Jack tells him, here's what you got to do. Kate has to deliver the baby. And then the cue music that's like really sharp and like kind of, emphasizes the point like, oh crap, this is dire too, because Jack can't be over there. Claire doesn't want to keeps him and Hein about delivering the baby.
Yeah.
So that scene was very good. I loved how that unfolded, and how that got Charlie out of the way a little bit because, he kept asking Jack because Jack is seen as kind of the leader of the group. Charlie's like, well, where's Shannon? Where,
There's Locke.
what happened to Boone? Why, what? I don't know. Nobody knows their blood types. And, when he's sent off to go try to find out if somebody's O negative or A negative. And, so it kind of like, okay, Jen, Charlie, go help Kate, or at least provide moral support or, whatever they're there for. But at least
Yeah.
they're kind of over there and they are able to be there for Kate, for Claire. And just like how, everybody kind of fell into place where they needed to be in this episode.
Yeah.
Because I was actually surprised how fast the episode was. I mean, it's the same length as all the others, but there's been a few, and this one included, where the pacing has just been so chaotic and roller coaster fast.
Yeah.
And it was like I couldn't believe the episode was over. Um, as fast as it felt. I felt drained at the end of it,
Yeah.
emotionally and kind of, you know, physically because it was a lot to take in and you feel like you're just constantly bombarded by all these things that are going on. And gives you kind of an appreciation of just the direness that was unfolding that day,
Yeah.
for Jack and others.
Yeah. That um the scene with Sun and Jin seeing each other for the first time and who knows how long. Um and I think in other shows, you know, whether it's sitcoms or not, you see like couples who are part or divorced or broken up and they have this spat in the middle of a conversation but here it's like they read the room. And I feel like Sun and Jin this entire episode, they're able to read whatever room they're in
Yes.
and assess and go do whatever they need to do. Um, when they get back to Kate and Claire with Charlie, you know, Charlie is talking to Kate and Jen just goes over to Claire. And I think they were about to come over and he holds his hand up just to say, no, no, you two communicate. And he
Mhm.
starts talking to Claire in Korean. I don't know what he says,
No.
but he's very calm. He just seems so there's a caring to his voice that just allows Claire to open up and talk about how afraid she is and being on the islands and having the baby and so I just they're definitely Jin and Sun. The fact that they're able to understand the scope of everything that's going on and not make it into a bitch fest. Like it's I think that just amplifies like how good this episode is.
Yeah.
Um and it just really shows their ability to handle stress and the scene where Claire screams out in pain and Charlie's gonna stand up and Jen puts his hand on his shoulder and sits down and is like, no, 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 no. We're staying out of the way. Like, let
Yes.
Kate do whatever she needs to do. She's the one being responsible for it. And the look on Charlie's face, where this recognition of like, yeah, you're right. We shouldn't get involved and make it any more stressful than it is. I laughed so hard when I saw that scene. Honestly, it felt good. I think it was needed because how stressful the episode is. And we've talked about how the show does a really good job of providing these moments of levity just to kind of, oh, taking a
Yes.
breath when it's like you're amped up so much in this episode that, and you're right, this episode flies by. Um, by the time we're getting to like Kate and Jack on the beach, I'm like, oh, or even the closing scene with the sad music with everyone around Claire, you're just like, holy crap, this episode is already over.
Yeah.
And it's almost like you don't have all the time in the world to even grieve Boone, even though we do. Um, yeah. Uh, and even with our questions that we do, I was like, I have no idea which one is better than the other, which character is better than the other.
Mhm.
Um, because everyone does such a phenomenal job in this episode in their role. Um, I think you could probably pick anyone who was on screen and find a good excuse for them being like the most interesting character or any one of the scenes.
Mhm.
Not that I have a list of characters or scenes that I wrote down or anything like that. That's
Um, well, I will say that one of the things that we didn't discuss as yet, and I'm not sure if it was going to come up or not, but I did want to mention it that in a crisis, Sawyer came through. He didn't set up any roadblocks. When Kate said, "Hey, I need all your alcohol. This is what's going on." He didn't even bat an eye. He didn't
yep.
give her, you know, a bunch of shit about, no, I'm not doing that. What are you going to give me? Or
He read
anything
the room
like that.
too.
He read the room too. Exactly. And he immediately gave it up and he was like, "Hey, is there anything else I can do? Is there anything else you need? I can go with you." And she's like, "No, no, there's already a lot of cooks in the room. Don't, you're good." And I
Just
just,
thank him.
yeah. And I
Like
really
props to
thought,
Sawyer.
yeah. And I felt like, okay, Sawyer's always been, up to this point has always been like, what's in it for me? What's in it for me? But it showed that he really could, like, maybe, in his time on the island, he is starting to change who he is, and he is growing as a person. And I really liked that, even though it was a little small scene, it showed him uh going outside of his usual response, which is what's in it for me, to what can I give you? Is there anything else I can do?
Yep.
And it's just like you said, he read the room, he read the situation. It was no time for his bullshit. It was all hands on deck, and he did exactly what he needed to do to help with the situation, and not hinder, but to help any way that he could, because it's not like he's had a great relationship with Boone.
Yeah.
Um, his relationship is really with Kate. But I think that the old adage is to get more flies with honey than vinegar, I think kind of applies. And I think he's probably seen that he can do more, uh, you know, taking that step rather than trying to get something from the situation. And I just thought that was actually a good scene too. It's a small one. And if you were turning away from the screen and turning back, you could miss half that scene because it was pretty small.
Yeah,
Um,
and
so,
even before that, when Claire walks up, you know, she's asking how long it's going to be for the boat.
mhm.
I think Michael asks if she's okay, and
Yeah,
Sawyer asks, "Hey, you want some fish?" Like, so they're
yeah,
like really. We've talked about it. Sawyer, he, he does some fiendish things, but man, there's this charisma about him. There is a likability about him that's like hard to kind of get away from. So that was really nice that he offered food for her. and maybe he didn't read the room when he said, "Oh, she likes me," but
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah, he didn't read the room there. And we did have of course a Sawyer nickname. He called Jun Kato.
oh
Going back
right,
to I think Kato, is that Green Hornet from Green Hornet? Or
I
Pink
don't know.
Panther. I think that, uh I'm not sure. If anybody knows, put it in the comments for us. But I know that kind of, is a nod to something quite long ago and another pop culture thing. I just not sure if it was the Green Hornet or if it was Pink Panther or if it was Batman from the 60s. I
No,
just not sure. But
I don't know why, but for me, because it was Sawyer's character, I kept thinking like he was trying to reference some like Karate Kid character or something. And that's probably
maybe.
not right. That's probably not right, but because he kind of has these uh racist or stereotypical nicknames associated with someone like calling Saeed Muhammad or terrorist, like so
Yeah.
that's where my brain went. But yeah, if anyone knows, please let us know.
Yeah. Let us know. So we're not dying of curiosity over here. But yeah. Yeah, it's some lightness in the room, given how heavy it was. What did you think? Because you have enjoyed seeing Jack's father played, I think, by John Terry. What did you think of their kind of conversation at the poolside?
Um, well, his father doesn't say much. Um, but Jack literally asks him like, because he's afraid of being a bad father and husband, um, and he's having trouble writing vows, and he doesn't want to mess up, and the comments just seem, they just seem insensitive because they're so direct. Um, where he's talking about, I think you mentioned like his commitment is his strength, but
Hmm.
his weakness is not knowing when to let go. In my brain, I was like, is he telling him to let go of Sarah? Like, what is he trying to tell his
I thought
son in
that,
that
yeah,
moment?
I thought it was an interesting conversation because kind of like you, I was like, yeah, is he trying to tell him to let go of Sarah, even though he said that she's a wonderful, wonderful girl or wonderful woman. I don't remember which adjective he used, but
Yeah,
even
they said
in
she's a beautiful woman, I think was his description.
yeah, yeah, hopefully. But then at the wedding when Jack is supposed to say his vows, and he's like, I don't have any. I didn't write them, even though I had a month. So then I had to think about why I didn't write them. And I'm like, okay, are you getting ready to like bolt from the altar?
Yeah.
I really thought he was like going to say, I can't do this. Um, so I was kind of like in a quandary about his conversation with his dad the night before, and then the way his conversation was, or his vow section was kind of shaping up to let her down, maybe. I don't know, in front of all those people, but you know, so it did leave me, oh, okay, he married her, but did he really want to marry her? It left me kind of questioning.
Yeah, I think I wrote down all of his speech there.
Mhm.
Because that was an emotional moment too. Um, because he repeats his father's words of like he's not able to let go. And then he says like or maybe he's afraid of failing.
Mhm.
And so my thought was, well, maybe he's afraid of letting go of that feeling of feeling like he might fail. And maybe that's what was like holding him back. Um, um, but when he tells her that he didn't fix her, she fixed him,
Mhm.
like I in the way his father talks to him, past and present, like it's one of those things where, you see him struggling with what seems like a healthy relationship with Sarah. Like they're about to get married.
Yeah.
Like, they're joking the night before while he's playing piano and he's trying to figure out vows and she's like, "Hey, you don't have to do vows. Like it's okay. I just saw a bunch of wedding magazines and thought it would be fun."
Yeah.
And she jokes about how there's gr- uh girls checking him out. And he just jokingly like, "Oh, any of them pretty?" Like, so they have that like banter where I
Yeah.
feel like, hey, that seems like a pretty open, healthy relationship. And knowing that he's come from the toxicity that is his dad,
Hmm.
um, and that we've seen that his mom has taken his father's side before on things. So, um, you know, trying to see someone grapple with that internal sense of like, am I going to fail? Am I going to mess up something here? Um, so I guess I can appreciate his struggle with trying to find the words.
Hmm.
Um, but I do think there was a sense of during those flashbacks, like when she was giving the speech, um, and when he's hesitant on his vows, there was this sense of like, is he marrying her? And he even mentions it. Am I marrying her because I saved her?
Hmm.
Um, and so I think him saying that made me think the same question.
Yeah.
Um, so it was there's so many different elements in this episode. Like we're seeing Jack as such a dedicated individual trying to save patients, and in his own personal life, he struggles to know what the right answer is.
Yeah.
Like when he's in the operating room, you think, oh, he knows what he's doing. He's got the answers. He saved her from what was considered a forever crippling injury, and
Hmm.
yet he can't see the forest through the trees with Boone, or
Yeah.
whether or not marrying Sarah is the right thing. So it's interesting to have that multi-layered um, with a lot of these characters. But in this instance, Jack's just very complicated, and
Sorry.
all right.
I'm like, what are you doing
We,
back there?
we'll have another cat counter up here in the
I
corner or
know.
something.
Yeah, there's been a few today. Yeah, he's being goofy. I don't know. That's Spunky G. So he's the goofy cat. He's up to something. I think that the way that night before conversation and then the day of the wedding, I think for me, I'm left wondering, well, if since we're seeing that he got married, what happened to his wife? Because as we see, um, he was supposed to be bringing his father's body back to a funeral back in LA. There's no sight of a wife involved. So did they eventually go their separate ways? What happened to Sarah? Because obviously, Jack and Kate have chemistry on the island. So whatever happened, they didn't last for whatever reason. So that, if you're kind of deducting down, like, okay, well, what's kind of what was happening before,
Yeah.
it's kind of sad that it doesn't seem like it worked out.
Yeah, it's the interesting thing with the flashbacks. It's hard to pinpoint when these flashbacks are happening.
Hmm.
So, like, oh, was this 5 years ago? Was it 5 months ago? With some of the flashbacks.
Yeah.
This episode, the fact that, you know, his father does show up, so that's before the
I'd say the big blow
previous
up.
episode. Right. So it's before that. Um, so it does seem like this must be at least a year, multiple years in the past. Um, And yeah, you're right with the her not being present with him, I guess trying to recover his father's body from Australia. Could that mean that, he's just dealing with it all on his own because that's how he deals with things? I don't know,
Yeah.
but the question mark of whether or not he's truly into marrying her kind of makes you think, well, it doesn't seem like this was a long-standing thing after all. Yeah. Oh, this
Well,
episode.
I know the questions are particularly difficult in this episode. Do we honor Boone and maybe forego the questions, or do you want to try to tease out what your favorite scene or standout moment is from the episode, or
Um, I'll try to,
articulate
I'll,
one?
so I had, four that made my top list.
Let me see.
Um,
2, 3. Oh, I had 4 as well.
all right.
I did the Travis list too.
Um, so three of them involve Jin.
Okay.
Um, the scene where Jin is working on the boat and he hears Kate,
Hmm.
and you hear the ocean, the waves crashing, he's chopping on the boat. And the fact he's able to hear, and he takes a step back, and all that the running through the jungle, that sequence I think is awesome.
Hmm.
Um, Jin holding Charlie down as they're like in the 50s in the men's waiting room as the women are delivering on their own. That scene, I chuckled so loud. And then after the baby is born, and Jin goes to shake his hand, and Charlie just gives him a big hug. But then very briefly, you see him kind of like hopping up and down, cheering and
Yeah,
hugging. I thought that was so fun and sweet because Jin is a very
reserved.
serious, no
Mhm.
nonsense, but there is this element of softness to him that we don't see a lot of. But
Yeah.
in an earlier episode, he asked Son if the baby was okay after she came back. So there is a level of like concern that he has there. So that was great. And then the other scene that I mentioned, I'll probably say I'll even though it's the sad bits,
Mhm.
the final scene where it's kind of this multiple different scenes within one scene where Claire's walking out. So when Jack starts walking towards Saeed
Mhm.
and Shannon, and we don't hear him vocalize what happened, but the look on his face before he starts talking,
Mhm.
and then you see Saeed and Shannon see the look on his face and realize
Yeah.
something devastated happened. That's uh gutting. And then it then moves to Shannon alone in the
Yeah.
cave. It's just heartbreaking. Um, it feels real. Um, and I'll make that one my most interesting or favorite scene just because it's a final moment, like a reaction for the loss of a character.
Mhm.
And it hits hard. So, what were your four?
So you mentioned with John and Charlie. I really liked that whole scene where, Kate is finding strength and insight to help Claire. And then when she, screams out, Charlie's like, you know, the ever-present, you know, person that wants to take care and take the pain away. And I just love how Jun puts his hand on his shoulder, like, no, we're meant to be here. Let's, not be two more cooks in the kitchen, so to speak. I
Yeah.
really love that. I really liked how, we get a little insight into Sawyer's growth with his scene to help Kate without any sort of hesitation, and that he's willing to, come and be in the cave and help out any way that he can. I
Yeah.
thought spoke volumes for him. I thought the conversation between Jack and his dad at the poolside was, very interesting, very telling, and also leaving a lot more to be answered at some point down the road. Um, I really liked the end scene. That's not in my list, but I would say that's probably awesome. Should have been on my list as well because it was very powerful. And it's like you said, we don't get to hear what Jack tells Shannon and Saeed, but all you know is that God, you wouldn't want to be in his shoes at that moment. And the
Yeah.
way that he looked and the way she responded, the way you can just tell she's like almost not believing and yet staggering back from the blow of the news. And
Yeah.
how Saeed kind of puts his hand out to steady her. Um, that was pretty powerful. And then, like you said, when she's in the cave with him, with Boone, and saying goodbye. And that leaves questions like, how is she going to feel about the fact that when Saeed said, did you want to go back, the night before, well, hey, should we go back? And she said no. Now she's got to live with the fact that she wasn't there for her stepbrother.
Yeah.
And their relationship was strained at that time. So what kind of, not only is she having the grief, having not been there, but probably some guilt as well, that she's going to have to come to terms with and mediate in the days ahead. And
Yeah.
how does that bode for Saeed? Because they have a blossoming relationship. So, is she gonna, kind of like lash out at him, hold him accountable for picking that day of all days, that
Yeah.
type of thing. So it leaves a lot of questions. I think I would say that kind of my number one is a scene that we already talked about, and that's with Jun and Sun, as she's trying to translate the the speed and pacing of that whole scene really reminded me of other scenes that they've done, particularly, or for example, when Shannon Saeed, Sawyer, I think Charlie's up there, Kate's up there, when they're all talking over and around each other when they're hearing the transmission on the radio. And I just think that that takes a lot of skill to pull the timing off for that, and make it seem like it's truly happening,
Yeah.
to allow the audience to be totally immersed in that moment, and not questioning things. We're so involved, we haven't jumped the shark at all in any of this. It feels like this naturally could happen this way.
Yeah.
And so I really like that scene quite a bit. And just like how, all the dynamics behind it, particularly between Jun and Sun, that's going on. And then, Charlie hearing, Claire's name and, immediately wanting to know, oh, I gotta, where's Claire? I lost sight of her, you know,
Yeah.
and that kind of thing. So anyway, that I would say that's probably, my scene.
No, that's a great scene. That should have been on my list too.
Yeah, why wasn't
I don't know.
it?
We talked about the way that they were able to read the room and
Yeah.
not turn their bickering into a problem, and were able to focus to get stuff translated and figured out. Um, yeah,
And
yeah,
to
love it.
the character, most interesting character from the episode. Putting you on the spot again. Do you think you
Um,
do you have another, long list there or
I have five. I have Jack, uh,
yeah?
Jen, Sun, Kate, and Claire.
Mhm.
Um, and all for different reasons. And we've talked a bit about each character. Claire seems completely believable in her fear and the birthing. Kate stepping up to do whatever's needed to help Boone, and then she shifts gears to help Claire. Um, Sun and Jen both able to read the room, do what's necessary to help. Um, and then with Jack, getting the flashbacks and understanding his, you know, difficulty in
Mhm.
finding a way to make a healthy relationship and like I guess just feeling comfortable in it to where he's not going to be the problem, much like he felt like the problem with his parents growing up. Um, so those were my five. Uh, it's hard. I keep leaning towards, I feel like I keep leaning towards Sun or Jin because they're on opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Sun is pivotal in trying to make sure Jack doesn't kill himself while trying to save Boone. And Jin is, communicating. Well, one, he hears Kate's cries for help. He goes to the caves, helps communicate to Sun what's going on, and you know, but he's on the side of like that's not death, where he's with
Mhm.
Kate and Claire and Charlie um and I mean I Jack has the most to do in this episode, and we learn a lot. Um, and I feel like maybe it should be him. Um, I know I'm just delaying the inevitable. I really like Jin's role. I like that he brings this like lightheartedness as well as softness, but I feel like Sun is the right answer
Mhm.
because she plays this. Because this episode is all for me, it's really about Boone's injuries. I know there's the pregnancy, but
Mhm.
I think the major concern is Boone's life and whether he's going to survive.
Yeah.
And she just provides this calm, practical reasoning to Jack when he is just clustered and, exhausted. And I think that just kind of highlights what we haven't even seen of Sun yet. And likewise of Jin. But uh, if I could do 1A, 1B, it would be both of them.
Mhm.
But I'll say Sun.
Okay. Yeah, I am with you completely 100% on all of those. I actually had a tie. I had Sun and Jin.
Ah,
It's my favorite. The couple of the of the island. Um,
yeah.
so to speak. Really, and I liked how you articulated earlier about really reading the room. And I just really think that they rose to the occasion in spite of everything that personally they're dealing with, and what's motivating them to continue every day on that island, and for them to be able to play pivotal roles in spite of that, is very challenging. And I like the elegance of both characters and the grace, that they conveyed, in being able to put aside the personals, and really rise to the occasion to help in the respective areas that they needed to be in. So for me, I selected both, and I had missed. identified who Sun is played by in a couple of episodes ago. So I wanted to correct that error and say that it's Yoo Kim who plays Sun brilliantly,
Yeah.
as well as Jin, who is played by Daniel Day Kim as well. So I just think, congratulations to both of them for just, really delivering. I mean, they don't have like huge roles, but they are part of the second tier core, I'm going to say,
Yeah.
and just continue to show um, what they bring to the island, even in spite of some of the language barriers that Jun has. Um, that's written into the show the way that it is. Um, just continues to amaze me that they're so integral
Yeah.
part
And
of the show.
um, I don't know if I mentioned it earlier, but or if you did, when Kate is communicating, when Jen discovers them and she's trying to communicate that he needs to get Jack, and he says, Jack, doctor, and the relief on her face, when she's like, yes, doctor. Like
Yeah,
that little bit of a moment, like much like when we with Sawyer scene, like this little blip of a moment where, you know, the communication is so key, and the fact that he's able to understand well enough and she's so relieved that he gets what she's trying to say.
yeah.
Um, I I I think it's like just a brilliant little
Mhm.
addition to what's already a great episode. So
Yeah.
I want to make sure and mention that moment too.
Yeah. No, that is a good moment. And Boone had to play a hard part, probably with all the makeup and things like that. Um, so rest in peace to Boone, um, who is now gone from the series. It'll be kind of a weird going forward to not see his face and to see him following. And I am kind of curious how is Lot going to process that grief when he realizes that um, Boone is gone. A
Yeah,
little thing niggles in the back of my mind that if we have the idea that the island is, kind of like doing all the buttons about how things go, was Boone the sacrifice so that way Locke can continue to walk? I do kind of wonder that.
yeah, yeah. Because a lot kept falling down, and Boone was the
Hmm.
only option to climb up into the plane. So um, that makes sense.
Which he did
Um,
willing. And
yes,
and if we think back to that, I think it was the same episode where uh the ruse of his dad for Locke to give a kidney, it had to be his idea. And I almost feel like that whole thing is mirrored with Boone. Would he have gone up there if Locke was able to? But,
yeah,
it was like that was the one time when Boone got the opportunity to lead and he lost his life as a result,
yeah.
you know.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Always trying to be the leader or trying to be involved in some way, the super helper,
Hmm.
and then he's the only one available. He steps up, and
Yeah.
yeah, that's a tough way to, I guess, end as a character on the show. Um, when as a viewer, you can see initially he's not being seen as a leader that maybe he wants to be seen as. And was always there to say, "Hey, we need you here." Like, and he was always encouraging Boone, and um, so the fact that Locke needed him to do that, to go up there to see what was in there. Yeah, and was willing to do it. Uh, but again, uh, the shock doesn't go away. Like
Mhm.
after many watches, it's still surprising to see all of it play out.
Any other scenes that you can think of that we haven't covered, um, that we need to, or should call out?
Um, I think,
Oh, while you're looking, I will just say generally, and I know that we've brought this up before, cinematography was yet again excellent. I can't help but call that out every time we have campfire scenes, and just getting the lighting done so nicely. And then the other thing is that we had a Brian De Palma uh, moment with the spinning uh, the camera around Jun as he's in. I think he's at the raft and he's trying to figure out where he's hearing this cry for
yeah,
help. And I thought it was both kind of like disorienting because you're trying to like, where's that coming from? It really kind of, heightened the idea of being lost and trying to figure out what direction to go. So I thought that was nicely done.
yeah, that reminded me of the Jack episode, The White Rabbit, where he was searching for the ghost of his
Mhm.
father, and there was a scene in the forest where he's like, and it's the background's vibrating, and so yeah, there's definitely a similar scene that like just adds an element of like urgency to what's happening.
Yeah. I will say I definitely look forward when we get, down into like the last season. Like I'm not trying to hurry it along, but I definitely want to be able to, you know, understand how the behind the scenes. I want to see Oz
Yeah,
and have a conversation about how this all just really fit together. How I'm always curious by structure and dynamics and, processes and how they're put into place. And, you know, writing this series with all these flashbacks and all many characters, and how they were able to sustain that over several years, bringing in different writers. I'm just in amazement that, at least here in the first season, it's really come together very well, very tight, um, and, leaving us wanting more. To that point, we will be back next Friday for our next episode that we discuss. Um, Otherwise, definitely subscribe, hit the notification bell. We're out every Friday. And definitely comments. I know a few times we were asking questions, so if you have the answer, please put them downstairs, with the understanding that I'm the newbie. So if you're going to have a spoiler, because you really want to ask Travis about something that happened in season 4, that's fine. But just, comment that it's a spoiler alert, ahead in your comments. And I'm hoping that because this is the 20th anniversary of Lost, which I'm just still shocked that I'm not seeing a whole lot in social media
yeah,
around the that fact. Um, I am just like, I'm sure there are other people like me who missed the train uh, with watching this the first time around. And so if you're also a newbie, definitely check out in your preferred streaming. I will say, uh, Netflix has all of them, all the episodes right now, as we're recording. And I'm thankful every month when I don't see Departing Soon next to
same.
Lost. Thank gosh. Thank the Netflix gods for that one. But do stay with us on this journey. We will be discussing every single episode of this seminal piece of work from the early 2000s of Americana uh, media. We hope that you'll follow along on our journey, and converse with us down in the comments if you feel comfortable. But at least, stop by and see us and hang out and listen to us talk about the series.
More the merrier.
Definitely. Thanks, everyone. Have a great week.